Hello, and welcome to Socially Holistic Podcast. Socially Holistic helps coaches and holistic entrepreneurs and women in heart-centered businesses make sense of social media so they can build their own online network and get more clients. As a heart-centered business owner, you do amazing work. Holly's mission in life is to help you help more people. Help us help more women in business with a 5-star review of this podcast. Please leave one today over at iTunes. The more women who find out about this podcast, the more heart-centered businesses will be successful. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the Socially Holistic Podcast. This is the Socially Holistic Podcast number 6, and I'm really excited to welcome today Beth Martens from Canada. Welcome, Beth.
Hello, Holly. Thank you for having me.
So excited to have you today, and I can't wait to talk about your business journey and how you've gotten to where you are today, because I absolutely love the things that you have to offer on your website, and I can't wait to share this with everyone.
That's great. Excited to talk to you too.
So tell us a little bit about your background, Beth.
I have come from a long line of entrepreneurs that had, and when I say long line, I'm really talking about my father. Okay. I was just thinking through the ancestors. As a matter of fact, I think there will have been some entrepreneurs in there, but different characters. So my dad I think he was approaching 40, and he had been his whole life working for people. And as a matter of fact, doing kind of what his dad had done too, just, more in that survival way that, okay, I've got young children, I need to feed them, time to go out and just get a reliable job. And so my dad did that for a number of years in that normal way. And then he just literally had a nervous breakdown and said, this is it. I can't continue to work for other people. I've got expertise. I've got some genius here. I need to just be able to fly and make the decisions and not have to get into the power struggles of working for other people was where he was coming from. So that I was working in that business by the time I was 10 years old. Wow. And very quick to enjoy having a paycheck at that age. It was like, wow. And then so when I was in university, I studied for 5 years and was doing my degree. And then I started hooking up to travel to India. There was a teacher that was actually gave me one of my programs in university. And then I went to see him in India. And that started a rash of traveling every year. So I went 8 times to that country. And I picked up a lot of training in yoga and meditation, in mantras, in writing music, which I wasn't trained to do. I was just really inspired to do that. So that really strongly influenced me. And by the time I was on my 8th trip, all of a sudden I was diagnosed with a stage 4 lymphoma, which I guess, had come up for a number of reasons. One of them for sure being that I was, at that point, I was very enmeshed in my family's business and really enjoying the freedom and abundance that it brought me, because it was a very powerful channel working in the corporate world in all those conventional ways. But obviously it had a toll on me at the soul level. And, I was leading this double life for sure, triple life, where my heart lie in my yoga and music and meditation, teaching and coaching. And then here I was doing, I don't think I ever did an 8-hour day in that business. It was always just ridiculous, 12, 15, 18-hour crazy days, and working 48 hours in a row one time. And, you get paid for it and it seems good. But yeah, this stage 4 lymphoma really taught me that things needed to change in a big way. And it took me 3 years to get through that. It was works that what I do with archetypes is what I discovered actually was going to hold the keys for me, which there was, as I mentioned, it was a pretty multidimensional diagnosis and cure. But if I have to bring it down to one thing that was really truly instrumental in making that change, was that I studied archetypes and I found the one that was sucking the life out of me at that point. Wow. And so then, having studied the archetypes and starting to take that forward, I entered into full remission from my cancer. Never have had to look back, thankfully.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you. And then that made me realize for sure that it was sort of the same breakdown that my father had in a way, now that I'm saying it out loud, that I wasn't able to go back and do the conventional thing, even though that was still outside of the box by some people's standards. So I went full time into coaching and teaching and doing my music. And that's when I met you, actually.
Yes.
A few years later, that I was working in Mexico and trying out a lot of different lifestyles for suiting my new vision and my new goals. And then for the last more than a decade since recovering, I've been working with women and helping them find their authentic voice, because I realized it wasn't enough for me to just be doing and teaching, but I wanted women to feel the creative empowerment that comes when they have that, just to talk yoga a bit, like the open fifth chakra, feeling the freedom of being able to speak your truth and get your art out there. And on top of that, to be valued for it.
Yes.
Right. So every time you think you hit the bottom, it's like, no. One of my favorite things to quote right now is that women make 1% of the world's wealth while they work. They comprise 40% of the workforce.
Wow. That's huge. It's a huge disparity.
I know. I was just double checking because I'd been saying that stat, and I'm like, okay, go back to the source of it and see the Huffington Post, and it's all very statistically laid out. And it's like, oh my God, this is not. This is not acceptable.
No, it's not. And I think it's very interesting, the work that you do about helping women unveil and kind of unleash their authentic voice, because it can be such a struggle for so many women in business.
Exactly, because we're coming from a model, the old school marketing was all about, okay, well, go do your research and look at what's out there and then see how you fit in or, how you can fulfill something out there and message towards what is in those people's minds, whoever those people are, hopefully your clients and the good people that you really want to work with. But what I've worked with in the archetypes in particular helps you find out what is like you said, your authentic voice. What do you actually genuinely want to say? What's going to get you out of bed excited every day to do your work? And then at the end of the day, you have the integrity of really truly being yourself and being valued for it.
Now, when I work with people on social media, I have this 10-week social media course that I run. And the very first section, the first week of courses, is looking at who you are and what makes you unique so that you can learn how to express that online. And I find that so many people say, oh, well, there's nothing about me that makes me unique. There's nothing that makes me different. And I find it such a struggle to help people kind of connect with themselves and see what it is that makes them different. Now, how would working with archetypes help people who are struggling with that?
It goes right to the heart of it and starts to pull out of you things that were literally unconscious. That, when I first started working with archetypes, I was lucky enough. The Carolyn Mace was one of my, you're going to ask me about my heroes. She's definitely on my list of hero entrepreneurs, even though she's an author. But of course, she had to make her living doing that.
Yep.
And so the archetypes are a way to look at where we literally don't see ourselves. And, if people look at us and you ask them, well, tell me kind of what my strengths are, tell me about my personality, tell me what you think I'm gifted at, chances are they can right away have something to say. Even if they just saw your website, if your website is speaking through you genuinely, that is. And your posts, I can go to somebody's page and I'll get a really quick idea about who they are and what they're doing. But having said that, if they're not expressing through their authentic voice, then all of those materials are going to show up as a kind of blank. And that's what happened to me when I started studying archetypes. I literally would hit this blank wall every day. Now, I was trained more than 10 years in meditation at that time, so I took it inward. I literally took that blank wall inward day after day, and because I was recovering from cancer, I had nothing. There was nothing else more pressing on my plate. My full-time job was recovering. And creating what's called a harmonic archetype wheel in the process was something that allowed me to see that, I had no idea how much. I'll just use one example of a powerful archetype for me, representing my life purpose, also was the key holder to recovering from cancer, is the rebel. Right. So all my life, I'd had my attention brought to that rebel like over and over and over again, especially by my parents. Those people that I was fighting with. I think it definitely showed up in years in my earlier incarnation. And, but by the time I hit this diagnosis, all I knew about myself, I couldn't name the rebel. I just knew I had this fighter energy in me, and that it got me into a lot of trouble. So mostly I would be thinking about that fighting energy as something that I needed to leave behind. I needed to be cured from. I needed, to somehow let it go. And it was doing the archetype work that made me realize, no, actually, this rebel energy is something that is at the core of me. I came to Earth with this. It's part of how I fulfill my life mission in a really important way. And then how do I awaken the archetype into consciousness so that rather than being at the mercy of its unconscious acting out, I can use it as a tool to fulfill my purposes.
And I wonder if that's what helped you get through the lymphoma, because you were essentially kind of rebelling against it and saying, look, you are not going to take over my body.
Yeah, and in my case, the fight really was with authority, and that's where rebel gets stuck. It's like in my case, it was medical authority that I had this. I was born with a fear of it, and had so many medical people in my life. There's doctors, nurses, and they're all really immersed in the conventional medical model. And then here I was faced with one of my biggest fears was actually getting cancer and then having to go through the medical system. So I tried to avoid that like the plague in the beginning. And then the way that it took over my life was phenomenal. So the rebel archetype in a way was serving me where the cancer was concerned, and it was not serving me in just allowing the authorities that generally are looking out for our best interests, which is not always the case. That's not a given. Yeah. But it's fighting. It's ultimately fighting without a cause. So when I awoke at that rebel, I was instantly able to see that, there's power and control struggles here. Some of them are very worthy. And, for example, the last one was when my doctor or my oncologist said that I needed a stem cell transplant, that half the people die doing that procedure, for example. Wow. So it was not a good stat. But the people that were in that statistically in my position with my cancer, all of them died. So it was this strange choice. It was like, do I go with this half a chance to live, or do I go off on my own with no chance to live? And it was as the moment I realized that it was the rebel, pardon me, not the rebel. I was really struggling with that rebel, that it was taking my energy, because I was so afraid of like that random control that an authority and a system and an institution can take over you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
And yeah. And so it just made me grow up to the next level and say that, okay, well, it's just, there are certain things that I have to accept. So I accepted a certain amount of treatment, but I did not go through with a stem cell transplant. I made a choice that in my doctor's eyes was really that of a death sentence. That's what they told me. You're signing your death sentence by not doing this stem cell transplant. And it was at that point, through the awakening of the rebel, I was making a choice based on not a fear of being controlled, but rather, and here's the key turner for me, that every archetype ends up being, but in its awakened position, it is driving from the place where you are, what do you love about life? What did I love about life? What did I love about my work? What did I love about just the beauty and the gift of being alive? Suddenly my rebel was at work for that and helped me make a choice around what I needed to do and how I needed to navigate, and then ultimately recovered fully. So I have to say that it was a success, what I found there.
Yeah. Sounds like that was a huge part of your recovery.
Yes, exactly.
Just that awareness of this archetype and how it worked in your life.
Yes, it's, to me, the archetypes can get into a way of just saving energy. That's the main thing, that if we're working with an archetype in its unconscious, it just generally is going to be an energy leak for us. So that's
interesting.
Yeah, so that's why I've noticed now that in these past years, the decades since I've been totally independent in my own business, that any work I can do with archetypes is always such a blessing, because if I have that additional bit of energy, then I'm going to get through what I'm facing with more grace, more ease, less chaos, less irritation, all that kind of thing. So that's where I think that it's been just an absolutely beautiful gift to be receiving it.
I love that. So you do one-to-one coaching, and you also do online programs. And do both of these aspects of your work involve archetypes, or how do you work with clients?
Yeah, my system that I work with is always starting with archetypes. So we do an assessment of one of three systems is what I would do. And then working primarily with the entrepreneurial creatives these days, what I find is always the first step. I'm noticing just over and over again, because women do have such trials and tribulations around their money. So I start with a system called the Sacred Money Archetypes. That's a program that I studied, and I've now been certified and licensed as a coach in, is helping women to get through the walls that they face, the obstacles that they face around making a living. That it's such a basic thing, as we talked about at the beginning.
Yes, it's a huge thing. And actually, just before we started this call, I was reading something, a newsletter that someone had sent out about raising your prices and how to raise your prices, and should you not, how much is too much, can there be too much? And there was a huge conversation around this, and a lot of people, I could tell that it really kind of touched people's core issues with money. It's a very, very sensitive issue for a lot of women in business.
Yes, yeah, exactly that. I mean, oh my gosh, the number of times I'll get on the phone with the women, and I'll hear all of what she has to offer, and the services that she gives, and the depth of transformation that she creates for her clients or customers. And then you hear what they're charging, and it's like, oh, hang my head! I can't believe that's what you have to face. And women so often typically have that nurturing side of them, and we want to see each other get ahead. And there's this big apology for what we're charging in the process. So yes, the Sacred Money Archetypes is beautiful at addressing those basic charging problems that come up.
And also, I can imagine it helps women in business value what it is that they have to offer, and understand that what they have to offer does have value.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the big thing that we're used to. It's actually a very odd setup, Holly, that I'm often meditating on this subject, that, just around the study, the culture of women, because my background is originally in anthropology. So I'm always looking cross-culturally at different trends and seeing how things play out with the gender, not differences, but actually women's relationship to women. And I'd be curious what you think about this, that, on the surface, we are the nurturers, we're the givers, we tend to be very generous with our time and our energy, we're the caretakers, we're the caregivers, all of that kind of thing. And yet the vibe that I've gone through with for the most part of my life, and that's luckily really changing these days, is that the underlying thing is that women are actually in competition with each other.
Yes.
Right? That there's this strange setup. And it feels like it's ancestral somewhere, that it got embedded in us, that somehow we were better off if we competed against each other for, basic resources, recognition, that sense that we have to be as good as that woman, or, like the really low level denominator that came up around, well, she's got that, I have to have that, whether it's the man or the clothes or the home or the dishwasher. We're kind of, our generation is a little bit past that now, I think, not being as hooked on it, but we're still inheriting that disposition to a great extent. And what I've noticed among women entrepreneurs in particular, you can tell me if you're finding this too, is that there is a staggering level of cooperation going on.
Yes.
This interview is a prime example, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of things happen online. It's so interesting that you brought this up, because I just had this conversation last week with two friends, a man and a woman, and he sensed that there was this competition among women, and he didn't understand it because he's a guy. And so he was asking us, why does this happen? And the woman who was with us also thought that it was a very kind of primal, ancestral thing coming from who knows when in our past. But it's kind of like protecting your cubs, protecting your family, protecting your stuff, and that somehow that's kind of flowed over into business and work and professional life. And I do think that our generation is starting to get past that, but I feel like there's a lot of it still out there.
Yeah, there's some, yes, I agree. There's been some shift. And personally, it wasn't until I've connected with large numbers of women entrepreneurs that I saw a level of, because I've had a lot of, in my life personally, I've had a lot of fake cooperation going on where there's surface level cooperation, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes down to really being the tallest poppy, or you start to want to, sprint instead of run, or you're coming, you just want to shine and stick out and stuff, then I've had this experience where the actions of women around me is going to be more about holding me back and making me feel like supporting me in my fears or my doubts, saying, "Oh, you can't really have what you want. I didn't get it, so then,
so that means you can't have it."
That's right. Whereas it's the women entrepreneurs I find who, and I just have to take a guess at why it is that I think because we take such a huge risk. I was just talking about this with a colleague that. We don't have any guarantees. Like when we put this work out, Holly, you and I, we have no idea what's going to come of it.
Exactly.
We're gonna do our best. We're gonna put ourselves behind it. I've already sent a note to my email list telling them that it's going to be happening. And but at the end of the day, it's a pretty big risk to be out, and especially when it comes to expressing authentically, and then you don't know what comes of it after you take all that risk and you really put yourself out there. Expose your true colors, and so it makes us vulnerable, I think, in a way that otherwise we might not be. Mm-hmm. And then to me, cooperation is the ultimate answer for vulnerability. We just it's like we're safer together.
Yeah, exactly. We get support from others, and I think that the online life that we're all kind of connected to now makes that so much easier. It makes it so easy to engage in things like podcast interviews like this, or guest posting on other women's blogs, or other kinds of online collaboration.
Exactly.
I think that helps us kind of create much larger networks, and of course international networks, in ways that we could never do that before. And I think that's really helping a lot of women in business.
Exactly. And that's why I'm focusing very, very shortly. I'll be announcing, people can watch out for on my website, a free call that is going to be addressing really specifically how to have an authentic voice online. So very much in line with the work that you're doing, Holly. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that I should actually get you to contribute to a program that I'm creating in the future based on the Break Free stories.
Oh, great. I would love to, yes.
Like plugged in version. So you can bring some of your expertise around social media to that.
Excellent.
Because such a big part of it.
Yeah, it is. And I find that so many women who aren't used to, who are perhaps coming from being kind of the local coach in their community, and who are now looking to open up online and start blogging and using social media, I find that a lot of these women just find it really, really challenging to put themselves out there publicly. And there are a lot of fears, because it's like they feel like all of a sudden they're just opening themselves up to the world, and there's just a lot of fear around that.
Mm-hmm, exactly. No, and that's what's blowing me away. I'm meeting day after day these people that there are absolutely genius at the creative level, and they may have a lot of accomplishments. They may have several books written. They may have long track record of doing great work and working one-on-one and that kind of thing. And then when it comes to their online presence, it's a total collapse.
Yeah.
Like you say, they're hitting the wall. They're hitting their fear. And when it comes to really having a voice that carries, you do actually, I've worked with a lot of people about how to develop their nervous system over the years using yoga and breath techniques and meditation, because you have to be able to accommodate a lot of energy just to simply get up in front of, and you don't even know how many people you're getting up in front of until the end of something, right? Like you see, you go your statistics and you say, oh my God, 5,000 people looked at this blog. That's amazing. And I didn't even know I was speaking to 5,000 people at the time.
Yeah, that's excellent. So tell us a little bit about what are the biggest challenges that you've overcome in your business?
I think the biggest one that always is sticking out to me now because of the work I've done in the last years is around money in particular. Because when I was telling you the story about recovering from cancer, and I somewhat arrogantly thought that I had been through the biggest transformation of my life, but really, obviously I had to survive in order to go on to do anything. So yeah, that was big, fine. But one thing that I found now I'm super happy that I've been able to get past this challenge is around having, and I thought when I was going along in my business, for example, I've grown incrementally, not hugely, but I've grown incrementally every single year since 2003, since surviving cancer. So that's good on the way, you can kind of look back and go, oh yeah, that's an accomplishment of kinds. But what I found is that I was hitting a ceiling because for many years I wanted to grow at a much more accelerated rate. I had a sense of being able to give way bigger value to my clients and to, I had the sense that my lifestyle needed to reflect a totally different level of income and, what I was able to get out of the business. I just sensed it was so much bigger than it was. And so I started putting a lot more work, a lot more effort, a lot more strategy. I got high-level coaching. I did a lot of stuff. And then I was still noticing I was more or less at this same ceiling with this tiny little incremental growth, but after having put monumental energy into it. And so what that made me do is start to come head-to-head with my money issues. And, the rebel came up again big time. For example, it turns out I have a fear of the banking institution similar to the medical, right? Like whether you're the government, you're the police, you're the bank, it to me all represents some evil authority that's trying to control me, take over my life. So that was a real awakening just to hit that and go, oh, I'm afraid to keep an appointment with the bank. I'm actually afraid. I'm getting a nervous system. It's bigger to me than getting up in front of 1,000 people to give a talk. There's something so emotionally charged sitting there. And through a lot of work that I did with other coaches, and I was actually at a coaching conference when I had a big breakthrough because I just started to connect with this energy, like, oh my God, I'm really afraid to make money. There's this fear of making money. And after some emotion came, I noticed there was like really a lot of tears, and I was able to cry. I got deeper into it and realized, no, actually, I'm not afraid to make money. What I'm afraid is to be seen making money. Right? So there was this...
It's a huge distinction.
It is a big distinction, exactly. Because it didn't even make sense. I was afraid to make money. I was born and raised in a fairly, at times, it wasn't always like that. My parents were very, very poor, but then next thing you know, their business really soared, and I had quite a privileged little upbringing for a time. And then as an adult, I went into my own hands again, backpacking and all kinds of crazy lifestyles going on there. But it was this moment when I realized that I was afraid to be seen making money that I started to notice how, for example, my great-grandmother, if I look back in my history, it was in fact killed for being wealthy during the time of the Russian Revolution.
Wow.
Their family was attacked, and the Russian people at the time were enslaved to my ancestors as they were Mennonites in that country. They had been invited by Catherine the Great to start working the land and do things that her own people were apparently not able to do. And then so there was this huge animosity and all kinds of tension between the Russian and the Mennonites, and it resulted in this whole revolution, which my great-grandmother, she was like caught in the bloody side of it. My grandfather actually witnessed her being killed right before his very eyes.
Wow.
And so we were, my dad was raised by that man, and it wasn't until his sister was on her deathbed, and nobody knew this story, right? It was all considered totally shameful. You didn't talk about it. They just went on in total survival mode, total unconscious mode, I have to say. Not their fault. That's what you do to survive sometimes. And so I just started realizing, like, oh, that's why I'm shaking in my boots. That's why I break into a sweat about going to the bank. That's why, and luckily, there was something in me even deeper than that that was taking care of me, because some people would have got into really deep financial trouble with that disposition. I've seen that a lot. And there was still something, like unconsciously, I was still handling stuff, and I've managed to stay in business, and I've stayed in the red. And, you know, it's not really as dramatic as I like to put it, but outcome. But nonetheless, you know, it was that emotional block. So it was through reading my own sacred money archetypes, through working with those archetypes and bringing them into my awareness, that I was able to see these pivotal little holdings for my energy. Because to have an emotional block like that does mean that we have to daily pour energy into the shadow of you know, what does it take to keep a lid on an archetype? What does it take to keep it from really speaking its truth and coming around to full consciousness, which is the equivalent of going through a fair amount of emotional release and pain and healing, and then to the other side when you start to really enjoy and thrive in that knowledge. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I had to face. And then once I got through that obstacle, it was like a miracle happened. And, you know, I had my first 5-figure month, which doesn't happen every month, but that was, you know, it was like, oh, there's a big release of some kind has taken place here. And the path is clear in a way it had never been before. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I had to face.
And I love how you're using your biggest challenge to help women with that kind of similar challenge. I mean, your work with the sacred money archetypes is helping women break through that point that was such a huge issue for you.
Exactly. That's always been my mission in life, that the moment I learn something valuable and I pick something up that can be a game changer for me, I immediately want to offer that. And so it's been a beautiful thing to see the transformation that, you know, I've got one client that she was a filmmaker, but went through several tragedies in her life, including that her brother was killed in the U.S. And so as a filmmaker, she had been just totally inert, lying on her back, feeling like she had been, you know, attacked. And in a way, her family had been attacked. And then she was lucky enough to just be hearing one of my seminars, and it sparked her. It was like, oh yeah, my voice is gone. This whole thing has killed my voice. So the first work that she did with me was the Sacred Money Archetypes. And within 8 days, she went out and got herself a $10,000 client.
Wow, excellent.
After being flat on her back for a lot of time, there was this sudden like, ooh, there I am. Coming to the surface. So yeah, it's a very transformative work in a way that is unexpected, because, you know, like money is something that I'm having fun with this as a rebel, to tell you the truth, Holly. It's it's something that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah. And because every time people do talk about it, it touches so many kind of sensitive points in other people that it creates such an uproar.
Mm-hmm. It's very provocative. Exactly. We were in the park with I'm a young mom, or I'm a mom of a young son, and I was with another mom who's in business, and I was starting to tell her a little bit about the sacred money archetypes. So every single time I said money, the people that were all in the park would turn around and look at me.
Oh no. Just
like I had said sex or poop or something. You know, like
that's a dirty word.
Exactly. There was just like this, it was such an attention getter. And on the one hand, you know, now I'm not afraid of it, which is a really great thing, because before I would have just been afraid to have those conversations, and in public at all, you know, and it feels like there's always a coming out to be having this discussion. But it's truly, you know, on the one hand, I think my archetypes would say that, yeah, if money didn't exist, I have all kinds of brilliant ways that people could navigate and get their needs met and thrive. That, you know, it doesn't need to be money, but it is going to be some version of money, you know, even if it's just trade or whatever it is. But to me, growing up and saying, okay, we exist in this economy. This is what's happening. This is reality. You know, women are so disempowered when it comes to money. It's time to just start speaking the unspeakable and say the things that everybody's afraid to talk about. And yeah, so you're triggered. So people get triggered. Well, good. That means your stuff is coming up, and it's an opportunity for you to actually release on it.
Mm-hmm. Unless it comes up, you really can't do much to work with it.
Exactly. Precisely.
So what are your top tips for women who want to learn to express their authentic voice and break through their money issues? Well, those are kind of two different things. But
yeah, exactly. My big one is a line that I come back to over and over again, and it's called "Feel your fear and do it anyway."
Such a good piece of advice, and I haven't read that book, but it's been recommended to me just so many times, and I love the concept of it.
Exactly. Is it a book?
There is a book with that exact same title.
Okay, there you go.
So.
Like, okay, you read the book. It's not mine.
Yeah,
exactly. So it's not my. It's obviously not my. I'm not the first person to say that, but it is such a big thing that we're like, we treat our fear like it's some kind of an authority over us, and that it's to be honored, that it's to be respected. Even in the New Age community, I was kind of like sort of attacked online for talking about I actually said to a woman that she was expressing fearlessly. Mm-hmm. And then there was this big backlash against me, as if, and I could take it, it's no big deal. But they needed to assert that, it's not fearless. It's like with healthy fear, or they were just so trying to defend fear. Mm-hmm. And it just, it was, okay, well, that's interesting. That's a mindset. That's something that, and I've been really thinking about this, that what is the healthy way to go through fear? You're not talking about go to put your hand on the stove because that you're afraid of it, so go put your hand on the stove. No, it's called for the sake of becoming more abundant, for becoming more alive, for having a sense of freedom, for being able to support your family, for being able to live your vision and see changes to humanity. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right? To speak your voice and take the risk of being criticized, take the risk of being judged, because actually that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. That's a given, right?
Yeah. And that's okay.
And that's okay. That just get used to it, that it's something that you're absolutely you're going to be having to face. It was one of the most beautiful things when I got some speaking training recently is they said, like, yeah, when you get up on stage, people are going to judge you. And it's like, right, there's so much training out there that say, oh, don't think about that. Don't worry about that. Nobody's judging you. They all want the best for you. and this is a beautiful way to just turn it around and say, no, be strong, be powerful, wear nice shoes was part of it, right? So that you got less to be judged for. Is one way to put it, but so that's something that, and then the next thing I would have to say in terms of advice is, don't feel like you have to do that alone. So why should we sit and shake in our boots alone? For God's sake, there are other women out there. There are ways to get supported. There, the whole coaching process that I've had the great fortune of getting the benefit of is a fabulous thing, and. That if we think we have to go alone, to me, it's just recipe for collapse.
Yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of people are also afraid of getting help, or perhaps they don't even think about it. But it can be so powerful to actually go out there and get some support for what you want to do.
That's right. And I know for myself, I was really afraid of investing in that I would get a lot of amateur free advice. And then, God bless them for all the time that they spent with me, but it's not expert help. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's not with people who have been in the place, who are already in the place that I want to go.
Yes.
And who can be guaranteed to be giving me advice that's not based in their own fears, whether it's for me on my behalf, because that's, we've got all our best friends that they're afraid we won't survive, so they tell us to play it safe and all that kind of stuff. Mm. The last bit of advice is around the women's tendency is to just be going for more qualifications. So if they're afraid to have their own authentic voice, whether it's online or through their business or even in relationships, they're going to go out and do the next certificate and the next degree and the next qualification, because they think that's what's holding them back. If they just had that next qualification, they would feel more confident and they could go out and ask for their value in the world. Mm-hmm. But there's a point. Of course, you want to be trained, you want to be qualified, but then that's it. It's time for you to go out and actually start doing this.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, it's in the doing that you have that direct. You just learn so much more. You become so much more qualified by your experience.
Exactly. So much more than you could from just taking whatever it is your certification training is. I mean, that's kind of your first step, but where you really, really learn is when you start applying it with clients.
Exactly. That's right. It's all trial by fire. That's the fast. If you want to go fast, and to me, that is the speed to go. We're going to go sooner or later. We may as well go fast. Is just to be inside that, and then if you have the opportunity to work with archetypes, I was going to mention if you're open to it, that I do a discovery session with my clients, and I don't offer this regularly, but there's a way that I can do a discovery session with a Sacred Money Archetypes reading for those really specially that are listening to your podcast, whether they came through you or through me mentioning it, then I would love to offer an application for a zero-cost discovery session that would be focusing on your Sacred Money archetypes. So you could get a short reading of the top 3 archetypes that show up in your zone and how you can create the most synchronicity as you try to move forward in your business and with having your authentic voice.
Oh, excellent offer. Thank you very, very much, Beth. Hopefully a lot of the listeners will take you up on that, because that can be really, really powerful from what we've heard today.
Definitely, yeah. And if you wanted to take me up on it, I'll just let you know that you can send me a simple email to beth@bethmartens.com. Okay. Go to my website, bethmartens.com, and there's a contact form there. So just mention that you heard me on Holly Wharton's program, and that you would like to apply for that session.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Before we wrap things up, can you share where people can find you online? We're going to include this in the show notes, but I just wanted you to mention it as well.
Yeah, again, my website, bethmartens.com. If you go to Facebook and search Beth Martens, I've got a page up as well that we don't need to necessarily be friends if you're wanting more privacy online, which some people do. And you can find me. It's Beth Martens /Vijaya is the name that I was called in India. It means victory. So I like to carry that little tag of reminder of victoriousness. It's actually my first name as well. So yeah, Vijaya is Vijaya, and I'm up on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can read a lot of blogs that have gone into the past. Also, please do join me on the Break Free Stories, as I mentioned, that I'm going to be hosting, Holly, where women entrepreneurs are finding out how to be in their authentic voice, how to get past their fears, to see how women have done it and got to the other side, so that we have examples of around us, because that's another really big reason that we might not be successful, is we just simply don't have enough people around us that have already done it.
I think that's really, really important. And that's one of the reasons why I created this podcast, because I want to provide more successful women sharing their stories so that women can learn from them.
Exactly. You and I have so much in common, eh? It's ridiculous.
I know. I love it. I'm so happy that I've gotten back in touch with you this year, because it's just fantastic seeing you online. Last question. Do you have any business mentors, or are there any women in business who inspire you?
Oh, definitely. My best friend and colleague right now, Sherry Rothwell. I might not even be alive without her in this last chapter of my life, where I'm raising a young son. Her and I connected over our children, and very much through our businesses. So she was my first business coach, Sherry Rothwell, somebody that I definitely recommend looking for. I've connected with Kendall Summerhawk, because she's been an amazing example to me. There's, since my guru days in India, she's the closest that I get to giving that kind of status in my life, although I'm careful not to give it away, with that blind faith that I did many years back. That's a whole other story. Again, Carolyn Miss is somebody that I have a huge admiration and respect for. She's definitely a woman entrepreneur that's done very, very well. She started as an entrepreneur, as a matter of fact. Before she got into all of her spiritual stuff, she was in business. And that's my short list.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap this up?
Just that I thank you so much for hosting me. It's been wonderful. I really love your forum and wish you all the best in getting your programs out, and hope to work together more in the future.
Okay, thank you so much, Beth, and thank you for sharing your business journey and all of your stories, and I absolutely love the work that you do, and I really hope that people take you up on your discovery session. So thanks again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Socially Holistic Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. Please help us help more women in business by giving us a 5-star review of this podcast. The more women who find out about this podcast, the more successful businesses there will be. So please leave a 5-star review today over at iTunes. Thank you.